The Curse of Raven Hollow, a true American horror story. It started as an innocent weekend getaway. Four best friends, bound by childhood memories and a thirst for adventure, heading deep into the wooded town of Raven Hollow, Pennsylvania. The town was forgotten, buried beneath years of ghost stories and abandoned homes. Locals whispered of a demonic witch who once cursed the land. But for Emily, Sarah, Megan, and Rachel, it was just another thrill-seeking trip. The girls arrived on a cold October evening. A pale mist crept along the ground as they parked outside the only standing structure for miles, a rotting Victorian house surrounded by a forest of dead trees. It looked like it had been clawed out of a nightmare. Sarah laughed it off. Megan lit a cigarette. Rachel took selfies. Only Emily, the quietest of them, felt the creeping dread she couldn't explain. That night, as they unpacked their sleeping bags and joked around, the power suddenly went out. At first, they thought it was a breaker. But then came the knocking. Slow, rhythmic, from inside the walls. "Is someone messing with us?" Sarah said, her voice shaky. No one answered. Suddenly, Megan screamed. Her body was yanked across the wooden floor by invisible hands. Her limbs twisted as she was dragged into the shadows. They chased after her, but the hallway stretched unnaturally long, like a labyrinth. That shifted every step they took. When they finally found Megan, she was hanging in mid-air, her body broken in places it shouldn't be. Something unseen was beating her mercilessly, throwing her against walls, clawing at her skin. Her last words were gurgled through blood before she was snapped in half and dragged into the floorboards. Rachel vomited. Sarah tried to run, but the door had disappeared. Emily whispered, "The witch. She's real." The legend of Raven Hollow spoke of Evelyn Drake, a woman accused of satanic rituals in 1812. Burned alive by villagers, she cursed the land. With her dying breath, vowing to return and feed on the blood of girls who dared step into her home. Now, Evelyn was back, and she was hungry. Rachel and Sarah tried to escape through a window, but as they climbed out, the witch emerged, not a woman, but a horrific creature. 8 feet tall, skin like charred bark, hair made of living snakes, eyes glowing red. She howled with a voice that shattered glass. She caught Sarah first, grabbed her by the hair, slammed her into the side of the house again and again until her skull cracked open like a melon. Blood painted the walls. Rachel screamed and ran, but the witch pounced, her claws tearing through her spine. With twisted joy, she devoured their remains. Emily was alone. She barricaded herself in the attic, trembling, crying, heart pounding. The witch stalked her, crawling on ceilings, whispering her name from the shadows. Emily. Then something snapped in her. This wasn't going to be her end. Emily lit a flare from her emergency bag and set fire to the dry curtains. The attic ignited fast. As the flames grew, the witch shrieked in rage. She lunged at Emily, but Emily drove a sharp piece of burnt wood through the creature's chest. Evelyn screamed, writhing and burning, as her form melted into ash and shadow. Emily stumbled out of the house just as the sun began to rise. The forest around her went silent. The house collapsed behind her, consumed by hellish fire. She was the only survivor. Today, Emily doesn't speak much. She lives under a different name, far from Raven Hollow. But sometimes, in the dead of night, she hears whispers in her walls, and she knows the witch is not truly gone. Note: this story is based on a real urban legend tied to Raven Hollow, a now abandoned area, with reported disappearances in the early 2000s. Multiple accounts have surfaced from locals claiming to see a woman-shaped shadow lurking in the woods at night. Proceed with caution if you ever find yourself in that region. The Witch of Black Hollow, a true American horror story. It was supposed to be a fun weekend getaway. 4 best friends escaping the chaos of college life. Emily, Rachel, Madison, and Zoe had rented a remote cabin deep in the forested edges of Black Hollow, a forgotten region in Maine where no cell signal dared to reach. Local townsfolk had warned them not to venture there. They laughed it off. Ghost stories, they thought. Just another small town superstition. But the evil in Black Hollow was real. And it was hungry. The cabin was old, centuries old. The wood groaned under their feet like it was whispering secrets. At night, they heard scratching on the windows. At first, they blamed raccoons. Then the smell began, a foul stench like burnt meat and rotting flesh. Zoe swore she saw a woman standing between the trees, hair hanging like wet ropes, eyes glowing faintly red. The next night, Madison went missing. They found her body hanging upside down in the basement, her back broken, face twisted in terror, limbs bent the wrong way. Strange symbols were carved into her chest, like ancient runes, still bleeding. Rachel screamed. Emily vomited. Zoe, she stared, frozen. Something about those symbols, it was like they were watching her back. Panicked, they tried to flee, but their car wouldn't start. The tires were slashed, deep claw marks in the rubber. They called the police, but their phones were dead, batteries melted from the inside. They were trapped. That's when Rachel disappeared. It happened while Emily and Zoe were searching the woods for help. Rachel had stayed back. When they returned, they found blood, smears across the floor, scratches on the walls like something had dragged her away. A trail led to the shed out back. Inside, they found her screaming. Her body was folded inside a blackened oil drum, bones cracking with every jerk. A horrific figure loomed over her, the witch. Skin as pale as snow, hanging loosely on bones, her jaw unhinged wide. Enough to devour a skull. Eyes, pitch black, soulless voids. She turned and smiled at them, lips split from ear to ear. They ran. Emily sobbed uncontrollably. Zoe forced her to keep going. But night had fallen, and with it came the sounds, the rattling laugh, the dragging of limbs, the growl that wasn't human. They barricaded themselves in the cabin, nailing windows shut. But it was no use. At 3:09 a.m., Emily was pulled from her bed. Not dragged, pulled upward, toward the ceiling like some invisible force had caught her by the spine. She screamed for help, blood pouring from her eyes. Her body slammed against the roof, again and again, until silence fell. Zoe watched, paralyzed with horror, until Emily's body dropped, lifeless and mangled, at her feet. Something snapped inside her. Zoe was no longer running. She remembered the symbols. The ones carved into Madison. She tore open an old diary they'd found in the attic earlier, belonging to a woman named Eliza Crawley, burned at the stake in 1692 for witchcraft. The last entry, blood awakens her, but fire seals her fate. Zoe found kerosene in the shed. That night, she set a trap, covered the floor with a thin trail of fuel, painted Eliza's symbols in salt. She stood in the center, holding a lighter. The witch came for her at midnight, crawling out of the fireplace like a giant spider, bones cracking, mouth drooling black ichor. Zoe waited until she was close, too close. Then she lit the floor. The witch shrieked, not like a scream, a storm of voices, male and female, young and old, all howling from her body. The fire engulfed her, but she didn't die easily. She fought. The flames danced like shadows trying to escape, but Zoe didn't back down. she screamed back at her. When the fire died down, the witch was gone, reduced to ashes and bone fragments. The forest fell silent. Zoe was found 2 days later, wandering the roadside barefoot, face covered in soot, eyes hollow. The police never believed her story. They ruled it a tragic accident, a case of psychosis brought on by trauma. But the bodies were never recovered. Just blood. And the claw marks. Zoe left the country. She never returned to Maine. But some nights, she dreams of the witch. Of Black Hollow. Of the whispers in the wood. And she wakes up screaming, every single time. Because she knows, the witch was never truly dead. She was only waiting. The Demon Witch of Black Hollow, a true American horror story. No one imagined that a fun getaway would turn into the worst nightmare of their lives. 4 close friends, Emily, Jessica, Brooke, and Samantha, took a yearly autumn trip, choosing a new location each time. This year, they picked Black Hollow Forest, a secluded area deep in New Hampshire. The cabin they rented through Airbnb was a Victorian-era mansion from the 1800s, surrounded by miles of nothing but silence. From the moment they arrived, something felt wrong. The air was still, the trees whispered, and an eerie unease gripped them. Above the front door, carved into a rotted wooden plank, were the words, "She drags the damned into the dirt, and feeds on their screams." The first night was filled with laughter, but around midnight, Jessica's blood-curdling scream shattered everything. She was gone from the room. The 3 others rushed outside, following strange drag marks on the dirt. Then they heard it, a sound like bones being slammed into the ground again and again. Not far from the cabin, under a tree, they saw her, Jessica, being dragged by her hair by a horrific figure, pale, long-fingered. Eyes like empty black holes, and blood dripping from her claws. The witch slammed Jessica into the dirt, over and over, until her cries stopped. Then she picked up Jessica's face, and slowly began eating her. Emily screamed, but Brooke pulled her back. The 3 ran for their lives, but when they reached the house, the door wouldn't open. It was locked from the inside. They were trapped. And not alone. The next night, Brooke said she was going to the bathroom. Emily and Samantha waited. 20 minutes passed. Then came the sound of dragging, something being pulled across the floor. Emily crept downstairs and found blood, and a shape twitching on the ground. The witch appeared again. She had Brooke by the hair, slamming her against the wall. Brooke's scream echoed into silence. The witch then smashed her into the floor again and again until her ribs cracked through her skin. Then she feasted, tearing into Brooke's body like a starving animal. Emily and Samantha tried to flee once more, but outside was pitch black, darker than the soul of the forest itself. They felt watched every second. The 3rd night, Samantha was asleep when she heard dragging. Emily was gone. Opening the door, she saw it again. The same nightmare. The witch had Emily by the hair, dragging her, and then violently throwing her into the earth. Again, and again. Then she tore open her stomach and began to devour her from the inside. But this time, Samantha didn't run. She grabbed an old axe from beside the fireplace. She remembered the salt from the kitchen. She remembered the words in the dusty book they'd found in the attic, bind her in salt, and burn her bones. The witch was still eating when Samantha snuck up and hurled salt at her. The witch shrieked, turned, and lunged. Samantha swung the axe, slicing off the witch's arm. The witch fought back, slamming Samantha into the wall. But Samantha didn't stop. She wrestled her down, soaked her in kerosene, and lit the fire. The witch screamed, a sound like 1,000 people howling in agony. When the fire died, only ashes remained. Samantha was the only survivor. Police found her muttering to herself. "She ate them. I killed her. I burned her." But no bodies were ever found. Only blood, and strange drag marks in the dirt. Samantha is still alive. But she never sleeps. Because she knows. Maybe the witch's body burned. But her soul still whispers in the trees. And she's waiting for the next group of girls. The Hell Witch of Raven Woods, a true American horror story. It was the fall of 2013 when four best friends, Emily, Claire, Vanessa, and Sarah, decided to spend the weekend in a remote cabin deep in Raven Woods, Oregon. It was supposed to be a peaceful break from the city. No phones, no internet. Just nature. They didn't know the forest was cursed. Locals never went near Raven Woods. An old woman at a gas station had grabbed Sarah's wrist that day and whispered, "The ground in those woods is cursed with her hunger. Turn back before she smells your blood." They laughed. A crazy woman, they thought. But her eyes, they were full of something real. The first night was quiet, until 2:46 a.m. Claire screamed from outside. By the time the other girls rushed out, they found her being dragged across the dirt trail, face down, her nails clawing the ground. Something was pulling her by the hair, something with pale skin and sharp, bony fingers. Claire's body flailed, and then, SMAAACK. She was slammed into a tree. Once. Twice. Bones cracked. Blood sprayed. Her jaw hung loose. Then the witch, picked her up like a rag doll and began eating her face. Vanessa collapsed in horror. Emily pulled her up, and they ran. Sarah followed, screaming Claire's name. But Claire was gone, half-eaten, twitching, and the witch's black eyes glowing in the dark. The cabin's door wouldn't open at first, as if someone inside was holding it shut. When they finally got in, they locked every window and sat in terrified silence. Vanessa sobbed in the corner, whispering prayers. The second night, it took Vanessa. At exactly 3:03 a.m., Sarah woke up to the sound of dragging again. But this time, it was inside the cabin. She turned on her flashlight. Nothing. The door creaked open. Vanessa was being dragged by her foot down the hallway. Her head hit the wooden floor with each bump. Then came the thudding. The witch had her by the legs now, slamming her back and forth on the floor, harder and harder, until blood pooled under her. Her screams turned into gurgles. The witch bent down and bit into her stomach, tearing flesh like warm bread. Emily screamed and threw a chair. The witch vanished into the shadows with Vanessa's corpse like a spider scurrying into its web. Now it was just Emily and Sarah. They tried to leave the woods, but the car was dead. The path they came from no longer existed. It was like the forest shifted itself. The trees looked unfamiliar. Everything was silent. Too silent. That night, the power died. At 3:13 a.m., Emily vanished from her bed. Sarah followed the trail, mud, footprints, blood. She found Emily just outside the cabin, being beaten against the dirt like a sack of meat. The witch held her by the ankle and slammed her into the ground repeatedly, head, back, neck, snap, crack, pop. Then she sank her long teeth into Emily's spine. Sarah didn't run. She froze, shaking, hidden behind a tree. She watched the witch eat her third best friend. Slow, messy, chewing every bite. But then something inside Sarah changed. She wasn't going to die crying. She ran back to the cabin and grabbed the iron fire poker and a jar of salt they'd used for cooking. She poured the salt in a circle and waited, holding the poker tight. Her hands trembled, but her eyes were cold. At 3:33 a.m., the witch returned. She crept through the cabin, crawling on all fours like an animal, whispering in a voice that wasn't human. "Sarah, your turn, your turn." Then she lunged. But Sarah stood her ground. As the witch crossed the salt circle, she screamed in pain. Her skin began to sizzle and peel. Sarah struck, once to the chest, once to the face, and then again and again until the fire poker was soaked in black blood. The witch shrieked louder than anything Sarah had ever heard. And in a burst of smoke and rot, she crumbled into ash. Sarah crawled to the road at dawn. She was found by forest rangers, bloodied, shaking, barefoot. She told them everything. They didn't believe her. They called it trauma, an animal attack. But no animals drag and beat humans like that. No animal eats faces and whispers names in the dark. Sarah knows the truth. She knows what she saw. The demon witch of Raven Woods was real. And if you ever hear dragging outside your window at night, don't look, don't scream, and whatever you do, don't run, because she loves the chase. The Devil Witch of Hollow Creek, a true and terrifying American horror story. In October 2014, 4 best friends, Lena, Ashley, Monica, and Jenna, took a trip from California to spend Halloween weekend in the deep forests of Oregon. They rented an old cabin near Hollow Creek. No cell service, no neighbors, just silence and trees. What they didn't know was that the land they had stepped into had been cursed for over a century, haunted by a demonic witch who was said to have never died. According to long-buried local tales, a woman had been burned alive in that very forest in the 1800s. After she killed her own children in a satanic ritual. But fire didn't destroy her soul. It transformed her into something else, a dark, vengeful spirit, a witch who hunted anyone who dared to enter her woods. The first night was calm. The girls laughed around a campfire, told ghost stories, and took selfies. But after midnight, Lena suddenly disappeared. The door was wide open. Outside, strange claw marks and dragging trails were visible in the dirt. Ashley, Monica, and Jenna grabbed their flashlights and ran outside. And that's when they saw her. The witch, a horrifying woman, with hollow black eyes, sagging skin stretched over bone, and fingers like claws. She had Lena by the hair and was dragging her across the dirt like a rag doll. Then, with inhuman strength, she slammed Lena into the ground. Once, twice, 3 times, until her body went limp. And then, she began to eat her. Ashley screamed. Monica pulled her back inside, bolting the door. All 3 huddled together, shaking. The next night, Monica was the one taken. At 2:57 a.m., the cabin door burst open. The witch was inside. She grabbed Monica by the leg and dragged her down the hallway. Her nails scratched the wooden floor as she screamed. In front of the fireplace, the witch lifted her and smashed her into the ground, bones cracking, blood splattering the walls. Then, she ripped open her stomach and devoured her, piece by piece. Only Ashley and Jenna remained. They tried to escape, running into the woods, but the forest twisted around them. No matter where they ran, they ended up back at the cabin. The witch was playing with them. The third night, Ashley went to the bathroom and never returned. Jenna waited, and then heard it, the dragging sound, the screams. She ran outside, just in time to see the witch slamming Ashley against the trees, again and again, until her body was broken and lifeless. The witch knelt down and tore her apart like a wild animal. Now Jenna was the last one left. But Jenna wasn't going to die running. She found an old axe in the cabin's corner and poured out the kerosene from the stove. She remembered something she had read in an old book. They'd brought for Halloween trivia: salt binds her, fire ends her. Jenna poured salt in a wide circle in the center of the room. Then, she waited. At exactly 3:33 a.m., the witch returned. She shrieked and lunged at Jenna. But the moment her foot touched the salt, she screamed in pain. Smoke poured from her skin. Blood oozed from her eyes. Jenna raised the axe and struck hard, once across the face, then again into her chest. The witch stumbled back, hissing. Jenna soaked her with kerosene and set her on fire. The witch's screams shattered the night, not human screams, but the sound of 1,000 tortured souls. Her body flailed and twisted in the flames until finally, it collapsed into ash. At dawn, Jenna was found near the highway, weak and half unconscious. The police claimed she was hallucinating, a trauma response. No bodies were found, just blood, deep claw marks, and burned wood. But Jenna remembers everything. She remembers the screams, the dragging, the broken bodies of her friends. And she knows that witch was real. And if you ever hear something dragging outside your window at night, don't look. Don't open the door. Because she may still be hunting.